As trade rumors continue to escalate as the trade deadline inches closer and closer for the Toronto Blue Jays, one team has emerged as a potential suitor for the Jays superstar, and that is the Chicago Cubs. We're going to break down that report and discuss what a potential trade could look like on this episode, as well as discuss another potential trade with the Minnesota Twins. There's been some rumors and reports floating around, so I'm going to break all that down in this episode. Before we do, if you are a part of the large percentage who are not subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit that button. We're on the road to 13,000 subscribers, and we produce daily Jays content, so it would mean the world to Peter and myself if you could hit that button. But without further ado, let's get into it today. And obviously the Jays are in the midst of a pretty good stretch where they've won 3 of their last 4 games, but that does not stop the trade rumors and reports from continuing to escalate. And it makes some sense. Obviously reports came out last week about the Jays potentially looking to be sellers, about how they could trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr., they could trade Bichette, and now this comes out today, an article from a Cubs writer saying that the Cubs, quote, desperately need power, urge to trade for the $19 million slugger, which is, of course, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And again, it's very interesting to discuss because we actually just, if you look back to 6 months ago, we covered a report where Bichette was linked to the Chicago Cubs potentially to play third base. Now the Cubs are being linked to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And the question is, do the Cubs want to trade for Vladdy? Do they have the assets to trade for Vladdy? And what kind of package could they provide for the Blue Jays and Ross Atkins? And you look at the article here, it says the Cubs desperately need power, and that should be the top area their GM Hoyer will target around the deadline. And the Blue Jays are settling into last place in the loaded AL East. They're starting to climb out of it. It gives Jay some credit here, but the more it looks like they could trade away Vladdy and begin retooling for next year. And that is what I agree with. If the trade deadline approaches and the Jays are, let's say, 5+ games out of a wildcard spot, they're probably going to trade one of Vladdy or Bo. And I think based on the reports we're hearing, it's that a retool is more likely than a rebuild. We know that Mark Shapiro and the Rogers Center, you can see it behind me, the renovations were very expensive, $500+ million. Maybe approaching $1 billion in renovations, whatever it was. The Jays need to put fans in the seats, and by trading away Bo and Vladdy and just completely tearing it down, it doesn't really align with what they're trying to do, which is obviously make money. But what could happen is they trade one of Bo or they trade Vladdy and they begin a retool where they acquire some assets back for these guys, whether that's a mix of prospects and MLB-ready players, maybe just prospects that are approaching MLB-ready, and they keep, let's say, they keep Bichette and they build around Bo, they build around the young guys that we have on the team, because currently our prospect system is a little bit rough, which I'll get into in a little bit, but we'll continue this article here. It says the Chicago Cubs could make Vladdy their everyday DH, which is a bit questionable. He's having a pretty good defensive season, which we'll get into a little bit later, and he's also won a Gold Glove a couple years ago, but you can see basically what it says is that of course, Vladdy has been hitting the ball very well, and it could make sense into the Cubs' perspective to put him at everyday DH to get some power in the lineup, even though power hasn't really been Vladdy's strong suit since 2021. It's a very interesting conversation to be noted here, and this is from Jim Bowden of The Athletic, a pretty notable reporter of the New York on the New York side of things. It says, Guerrero will be a free agent after the 2025 season, and the Blue Jays have yet to sign him to a long-term deal, and they get a much better return in a trade now than they would in the offseason or in the lead-up to next year's trade deadline. Therefore, they'll need to seriously consider dealing him this July if they fall out of the race. Makes sense, and obviously the Jays currently are a bit out of the race. We'll get into that now in a second, but the big question mark will be if the Jays are going to be sellers, period. If they are close to a wild card spot, Ross Atkins is not going to trade away one of these guys, being Bo or Vladdy, unless he thinks that an extension is not going to be done. Because, again, they're free agents. Both Bo and Vladdy are free agents after the 2025 season. So if they can't get a deal done, maybe they'll move on from one of them. Though all signs are indicating that Vladdy will be willing to sign an extension and that could happen if they don't want to move him. Bichette, on the other hand, is a little bit more up in the air, at least in my opinion, to potentially be traded or let go. But again, for Vladdy, he will be a free agent. It could make sense for the Cubs. And the question is, do the Cubs have the assets or want to give up the assets that it will require to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? Because Ross Atkins probably will want a mix of MLB-ready players and prospects. And I'll get into a trade proposed by Bleacher Report just to show you what some teams or what some articles and writers are considering Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s value, because it looks like the Jays, at least as of now, according to these writers, are just going to lose every trade that involves Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which is usually how the trades work with superstars. But maybe the Cubs could give up some MLB-ready guys. Maybe they'll be able to give up a couple of their top prospects. But the issue is the Cubs are trying to compete right now, so they're not going to be giving away a lot of MLB-ready players that could help the Blue Jays in a retool, but they also could give away some of their prospects. But then do the Jays want to just take on a bunch of prospects? That's the big question mark for the Cubs. But from the Cubs' perspective, again, it makes tons of sense. They need a hitter. And who wouldn't want Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? And who wouldn't want to trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at his lowest, or one of his lowest values, which is right now? Because in 2021, MVP finalists would have won it if Shohei Ohtani wasn't the best player in the world, or debatably going to be one of the best players of all time. Now, He's at a point where he had a pretty decent 2022, not the 2021 self. And then 2023 was rough. And then this year started off rough, and he's really starting to come into his own now as this season regarding his offense. But it's very interesting. And now we're going to discuss this. This one is a bit rough. So you can see Minnesota Twins. This is a trade proposed by Bleacher Report. Josh Goldberg quote tweeted it and basically said, no matter what you think of Vladdy, this is not even close to getting it done. And the trade is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for outfielder Gabriel Gonzalez and cash. So yeah, we went from hoping to get a mix of prospects and MLB ready players to one top 100 prospect, not even the best prospect in the Twin system, the number 4 prospect in the Twin system. They have a decent farm system, but one top 100 prospect and cash for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who was once an MVP, basically an MVP player. This is, it's pretty sickening to think that this is what people value Vladdy at. Now, obviously, Vladdy started off very poorly. He had a couple, last season he was very bad as well, and his defense was even worse last year. But he's starting to come into his own now. If you look at his baseball savant page, it is all red. He hits the ball harder than anyone in baseball consistently. His launch angle has been a bit down, so he hasn't been able to get the ball up in the air to hit for home runs like he did in 2021. But he's launching singles, he's launching gappers now, and he's carrying the Jays offense, him and Bo Bichette, who for the majority of the year have not been hitting at all, and you're relying on guys like Dalton Varsho, like Danny Jansen to carry the team. But now that Vladdy and Bo are starting to get going, it's a bit better. And Vladdy's value is going to continue to climb up. But regarding this trade proposal, no matter what you think of Vladdy, even if you think that he is a career 750 OPS guy, which has never happened, or is not going to happen going forward, you got to suspect Vladdy will probably nestle somewhere between 780 and 850 or 830 OPS at the very worst, or at the very least, sorry. But Gabriel Gonzalez, if you're unfamiliar with him, I'll pop up his stats here. I mean, he's a decent prospect. He has like a 900 OPS last year in, I think, AAA or AA, but he's a 20-year-old rookie. Well, he would be a rookie when he gets called up. And to trade him for a guy who is helping carry your team right now, and even if you're a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hater, you have to acknowledge the fact that the Blue Jays, without him so far in the past week or two, would be in a much worse spot. And despite his poor start, despite his poor past couple years, he's still a very valuable player. He's still only very young, mid-20s. He has a chance to be and get back to what he was in 2021. Yes, it'll take a lot of work on his part, but if you give up Vladdy in any trade, there's a very high chance that the team he goes to, he'll a fresh start or whatever it is, Vladdy will return to his MVP caliber self, and then you're losing any trade, and then it's going to be a disaster from the fan base perspective, from the optics perspective, from the GM, and that's why I think a Vladdy trade is pretty unlikely just because of the disaster potential. You think back to Alek Manoah, when you were debating trading him at his worst last year, because he was a Cy Young caliber player in 2021. He had a very good 2022. And then 2023, he fell apart. And then this year, people were talking about trading him in the offseason. They were talking about trading him really a few weeks ago before he made his debut. And now he's looking to be, again, it's only 2 starts in, but now he's looking to rekindle some of what he found before. And trading these guys at their lowest point is never a good idea, and it could be a disaster for the Toronto Blue Jays. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this trade. Would you do any of these trades? And let me know what Cubs players or prospects you would want in return for Vladdy. If you want to check out a video from yesterday, click on your screen now. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you tomorrow.